Hey everyone! Tonight we start with something that might rattle your nerves more than a little. Picture this. You're standing in the middle of a glittering corporate party. The chandeliers overhead are worth more than your car. The champagne flows like water, and people toss around buzzwords like synergy and disruption, like they mean something. You're dressed in your best navy blue dress, the one you save for the rarest occasions, and you're just trying to blend in. Smile, nod, keep your back straight. Then you hear it. "Oh, this is Elaine, Jason's mother," Brittany says, her voice dipped in honey and venom. "Our little leech. You might not survive this one." So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And hey, comment below with your city and local time. I love seeing how far this little story travels. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. ... I never thought I'd hear those words, especially not from my daughter-in-law's mouth. Not in a million years. The whole room didn't exactly stop, but something definitely shifted. Executives from Carter Tech, the company my son Jason had worked at for 8 years, looked around awkwardly. You know the kind of silence that hovers when someone's just said something a little too honest? That. I stood frozen, clutching the same modest handbag I've carried since Obama's first term. Brittany kept going, smiling like she was on a talk show. She's always hanging around our house. Poor thing can't quite manage since her husband passed. My cheeks flushed hot. 5 years since Thomas died, and this was how they saw me? A burden, a leftover, a sad little relic hanging on someone else's dime. But the worst part? Jason didn't say a word. He just stood there with that weak, polite smile, like he couldn't quite meet my eyes. I murmured something. I should find the ladies' room, and excused myself before anyone could see the tears brewing. As I walked away, Brittany's laughter danced after me like perfume you never wanted to wear. "She's just sensitive," she said. "We practically have to babysit her these days." The bathroom was blissfully empty. I clutched the marble counter and stared at myself in the mirror. Graying hair, fine lines tracing my eyes, a sensible pair of shoes that had never failed me. A woman who'd lived a quiet, honest life. A woman they clearly knew nothing about. If only they knew. If Brittany knew that the very company she flaunted, the one paying for her designer heels and avocado tile remodel, was, in fact, mine. Carter Tech was born from a dusty garage, 1 second-hand laptop, and 2 exhausted dreamers, me and Thomas. We sacrificed for that dream. We mortgaged our tiny home, raised Jason in between client calls and late-night troubleshooting sessions. When Thomas died, I inherited 51% of the company, the majority share. But he'd made me promise. On his deathbed, barely able to speak, Thomas had said, "Don't tell Jason. Let him make his own way. Let him stand on his own." I kept that promise. For 5 long years, I sat through board meetings silently, represented by my proxy, Mr. Wilson, a name chosen after my grandmother. I watched as the company grew, watched as Jason rose up the ranks on his own merit. I never touched the millions that were technically mine. I lived simply. I was proud. And I welcomed Brittany into our lives with grace. Even when she started making jokes about my old phone. Even when she told Jason I didn't present well in public. I splashed cold water on my face and forced myself to stand tall. When I returned to the party, Brittany was in her element, her red dress practically shimmering under the lights. She was laughing with the executive team, her arm possessively around Jason's. I could hear her voice, bright and cutting. "There she is," she called. "Elaine, come tell everyone about your bridge club. It's so adorable how you keep busy." I smiled like I hadn't heard a thing. "It keeps my mind sharp," I said. She didn't know that my so-called bridge club was actually a monthly sit-down with my financial advisor. We reviewed quarterly earnings, growth projections, and legal strategy for Carter Tech. Not exactly bunco night. Later that evening, as the party wrapped up, I was collecting my coat when I heard Brittany's voice again, this time hushed, but not hushed enough. "We need to talk about your mother," she whispered to Jason. "She can't keep coming to these events. She's embarrassing. People might start thinking you come from, modest beginnings." "She's my mother," Jason said, but his voice lacked muscle. It was the kind of answer someone gave when they were tired of arguing. "She's holding you back." Jenkins saw when she spilled her drink. "You're up for that VP role, Jason. You can't afford these distractions." That did it. I slipped out the side door without saying goodbye, called a cab rather than ride home with them. I stared out the window as we drove through the Seattle streets, the skyline blurring through my tears. That familiar ache, the one that comes when you're both angry and ashamed, settled behind my ribs. That night, I sat at the kitchen table in my little home and stared at the photograph of me and Thomas on the day Carter Tech launched. We were younger, broke, deliriously hopeful, two fools with a dream and no backup plan. I'd honored Thomas's wish for 5 years, but Thomas never could have predicted Brittany. He never imagined our son would be too weak to see what was happening. And I never imagined I'd be standing alone in the company we built. But I was done hiding. Tomorrow, I'd call Gerald Whitman, our lawyer. It was time to stop protecting Jason from the truth. Not out of revenge, out of love. Love for Thomas's legacy. Love for our son, even if he didn't see it yet. And love for myself, because sometimes you have to remind the world exactly who you are. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table staring into a mug of Earl Grey that had long gone cold. Outside, the misty Seattle rain traced quiet patterns down the window pane. In my lap, I held the photo again. Me and Thomas, grinning in front of Carter Tech's first office. Well, if you could even call it an office. It was a converted storage room in a strip mall between a laundromat and a check-cashing place. I was 26. Thomas had just turned 30. We were broke, exhausted, and the happiest we'd ever been. He whispered that day, "This is just the beginning, Elaine. We're going to build something that outlives us." Back then, I thought he meant the company. But now, I think he meant the family, the legacy, the belief that we could pass down not just money, but meaning. I traced the curve of his smile in the photograph with my thumb. Then, like clockwork, the doorbell rang. Gerald Whitman stood on my porch, dressed in one of his trademark tweed jackets and holding a worn leather briefcase. At 71, he still looked every inch the sharp New England lawyer, part college professor, part courtroom killer. "You sounded tight on the phone," he said gently as I welcomed him in. We sat in the living room, and I spilled everything. Brittany's comments, Jason's silence, their whispered talk of retirement homes, like I was some old cat they didn't know what to do with. Gerald listened without interrupting, just like Thomas used to. Then he leaned back in the armchair, his fingers steepled. "Elaine," he said, "it's been 5 years. You've kept Thomas's promise, but maybe it's time we revisit that promise in light of new conditions." I shook my head slowly. He didn't want Jason to be handed everything. He wanted him to earn his way. He has. Gerald raised an eyebrow. Has he? Or has Brittany done all the earning, and spent it too? He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, the latest quarterly report for Carter Tech. "The company's value has nearly tripled since Thomas passed," he said. "You could buy half the homes in Queen Anne and still have money left over for a vineyard in Napa." I thumbed through the pages, barely seeing the graphs and numbers. They all translated in my heart to one thing: 28 years of sacrifice, of late nights and broken printers and cold coffee and hope that outlasted our budget. "Do you remember how it started?" I asked, almost wistful. Gerald smiled. "Sure, but I want to hear it from you." "Well," I sighed, "Thomas was fixing computers out of our kitchen. I was a receptionist at a law firm. We lived in that little apartment off Rainier Avenue, the one with the leaky ceiling and the heater that had 2 settings, Sahara and Arctic." He chuckled. "I remember Thomas cursing the thermostat. He used to bring home busted towers, solder them back to life on the kitchen table. I'd manage the client lists, order parts, balance our checkbook. We saved every dime." I paused, the memories washing over me like hot tea on cold fingers. When we finally had enough, we leased that little shoebox office and opened Carter Tech. Those first few years were lean, but we were proud. We had something that was ours. "When Jason was born," I continued, "I worked right up until the contractions made it impossible. 3 weeks after giving birth, I was back answering phones with him in a bassinet beside my desk." Gerald's eyes softened. "He was your co-founder before he could walk." "Exactly," I smiled. "He was raised on the hum of hard drives and the smell of takeout. Thomas wanted him to grow up free from pressure. That's why we never told him." "You gave him normal," Gerald said, "but he still ended up working at Carter Tech." I nodded. He was hired after college. "We didn't pull strings, he earned it." Gerald grew quiet, then spoke with that slow weight of someone about to drop a boulder into a pond. "And Brittany?" I laughed bitterly. "She came into the picture 3 years ago. Polished, polite. But you know what she saw when she looked at me? A woman who didn't fit her lifestyle," Gerald guessed. "Exactly," I said. "She always made comments about my clothes, my house. Said Jason needed to modernize his image. She treats me like a stray dog they feed out of guilt." "She wants the image without the roots," Gerald muttered. "A classic case of champagne dreams, boxed wine character." That got a laugh out of me. "You're not wrong." He opened another folder, this one thinner. "Your shares. The trust Thomas created. The controlling stake is entirely yours until Jason turns 40. And even then, only a portion transfers. The rest? You decide." I took a slow breath. "I've stayed silent, Gerald, but I won't be pushed out of my own life." His eyes gleamed. "Then let's start thinking about next steps." We spent the next hour sketching out options. Quiet changes to company voting rights, ways to reclaim presence without revealing my identity too soon. As he left, he said, "It doesn't have to be a war, Elaine, but it does need to be a correction." After he left, I sat alone with my thoughts. I wandered to the mantel where the photo of Thomas and I still stood. He looked young and hungry and full of love. "I did what you asked," I whispered, "but I won't let her erase me." Then I picked up my phone. Next stop, the Carter Tech headquarters. I hadn't been to the Carter Tech headquarters in years. Not since Jason's first promotion, back when Brittany still called me Mrs. Carter instead of your mother, with that edge of disdain. The building had changed. Gone were the old oak doors and flickering lobby lights. Now everything gleamed. Glass walls, sleek finishes, that sterile, modern feel you get when consultants are involved. It felt like visiting a child after they've grown up and stopped calling. I dressed simply. A soft gray cardigan, navy slacks, a touch of lipstick. Nothing loud, nothing expensive. I didn't want to draw attention. Not yet. Today wasn't about Elaine Carter, majority shareholder. Today I was just a mother, bringing lunch to her son. The receptionist looked up, all manicured and mildly disinterested. Her name tag said Kelsey. "Hi," I said. "I'm here to see Jason Carter. I'm his mother." She blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I brought lunch," I said, lifting the bag. "Chicken salad on sourdough," his favorite. She hesitated, then called upstairs. A moment later, Jason appeared, tie slightly askew, hair a little rumpled, like he'd just left a long meeting. Or an argument. "Mom?" he said, surprised. "I thought you might be hungry," I offered. "Unless now's not a good time." He gave a quick glance over his shoulder, then nodded. "Let's go to the break room." Not his office. That stung a little. The break room was all steel and sharp edges. A glass table, designer chairs, and a refrigerator stocked with name-brand sparkling waters. He cleared space at the end of the table, and we sat. I handed him the sandwich. "You didn't have to do this," he said, unwrapping it. "But thanks." I watched him take a bite. Still the same kid who used to beg for ice cream sandwiches on hot Seattle nights. "You look tired," I said gently. Jason sighed. "Big project. Brittany's been on edge too. She wants us to move to Lakewood Estates." I raised an eyebrow. "That gated community out by the lake?" "Yeah, but it's expensive," he said, between bites. "Way out of our range unless this promotion comes through." I nodded slowly. "And what happens if it doesn't?" His shoulders dropped. "We'll figure it out. But Brittany's already working with a designer. She thinks it'll help my image, living there. You know, boost my credibility." I bit my tongue. That was Brittany in a nutshell. Image over integrity. We made small talk for a few minutes. Then I stood. "Mind if I use the restroom before I head out?" "Sure, it's down the hall to the left." Instead of going left, I went right. I wandered slowly, my heels silent against the carpet. I recognized some of the original staff, older now, more corporate. One gave me a polite smile, not recognizing me but sensing familiarity. I smiled back. Then I heard Brittany's voice. The door to a nearby conference room was ajar. She wasn't supposed to be in the building today. Jason said she had a design consultation. Curious, I paused. "Trust me, Logan," she was saying, her voice low and smooth. "It's a perfect arrangement. Jason gets the promotion, you get the contract, I make sure everyone's happy." "Are you sure the board won't push back?" a man asked. Logan Barrett. His voice had the polished charm of someone who sells million-dollar ideas in cheap suits. "Jason has a presentation next week. I helped him prep it. Once he's VP of operations, he can push the expansion through. The board won't question him." "And your husband?" Logan asked, clearly amused. "Does he know you're meeting me like this?" There was a beat of silence, then her laughter. "Jason sees what I want him to see. He's so desperate for approval, it's almost too easy." My stomach twisted. They weren't just scheming. They were exploiting Jason's insecurities, his hunger to prove himself. "There's just one snag," Logan said. "That mysterious shareholder. The one controlling the 51%. No one seems to know who it is. Jason says the shares are tied up in a trust. Some old legal arrangement, but eventually they'll be his." "Until then," Logan asked. "We work with what we have." The conversation drifted into something more intimate. I stepped away, heart pounding, hands cold. Back home, I sat on the couch, staring into nothing for what felt like hours. Brittany wasn't just cruel, she was calculated. And Jason? My son didn't even know he was being used. That night, I called Gerald. "She's meeting with Logan Barrett," I said as soon as he picked up. "They're planning to push through some kind of expansion project, using Jason as the front." There was a pause. Then Gerald said, "I'll be there in the morning." He arrived with Margot Daniels, the former CFO of Carter Tech. She'd retired last year, but still handled quiet consulting for me and the board. And, like me, she'd seen a few boardroom betrayals in her time. We sat at my kitchen table, 3 veterans of quiet wars. "They're leveraging Jason's promotion to pass a risky expansion," I explained. "Brittany's pulling strings behind the scenes." And she mentioned the anonymous shareholder. "They're trying to figure out who controls the 51%. Gerald's mouth tightened. "If they learn it's you, they'll act fast. Maybe push Jason to call an emergency board vote." "I overheard something else," I said. "She's been pressuring him to put me in a retirement community. Sunset Valley." Margot frowned. "That place is expensive. You'd have to sell your house just to afford the down payment." "That's the plan," I said. "She wants me out of the way." Gerald folded his hands. "It's time to act. Not by revealing everything, not yet. But we need a presence, someone who can attend the meeting, someone with authority." I looked between them. "Then let's bring Mr. Wilson out of the shadows." The next morning, I opened my closet and realized something important. Mr. Wilson couldn't wear cardigans and orthopedic flats. Margot had already thought ahead. That woman's always been 2 moves in front of the boardroom and 5 ahead in her handbag. She'd sent a stylist to my house, yes, a stylist, to help prepare my new look. "You don't need to look rich," she said. "You need to look unfazed by wealth, like it circles you." Whatever that meant, it translated into a charcoal gray pantsuit, a cream silk blouse, and a pair of kitten heels that made my ankles ache just looking at them. But they did make my legs look an inch longer, so I considered it a worthy sacrifice. I sat in the stylist's chair as she colored my gray hair into a deep chestnut, close to the shade it was before Thomas got sick. She trimmed it into a sleek, no-nonsense bob. With a little light foundation, some mascara, and nude lipstick, I no longer looked like the sweet old lady Brittany pitied. I looked like someone who could buy the building she insulted me in. When I stepped out and looked at myself in the mirror, my breath caught. I didn't recognize her. "She looks like she doesn't wait to be introduced," Margot said with a grin. "She looks like she has offshore accounts," Gerald added from behind his newspaper. "She looks like she's about to scare some people," I murmured, and I wasn't wrong. We arrived at the Carter Tech boardroom just before noon. The floor-to-ceiling windows glared with Seattle rain. The mahogany tables stretched like a runway beneath hanging lights. The reception staff didn't recognize me. Good. Margot entered first and introduced me to the board chair, Wendell Hayes. "This is Mr. Wilson," she said smoothly. The entire room buzzed. For 5 years, Mr. Wilson had been the silent proxy on the other end of a fax machine. Now the ghost had arrived in person. I took my seat silently, nodding to each board member, noting how Logan Barrett sat in the far corner with his confident lean. And there, seated beside him, was Brittany, dressed in red, smirking like she'd already won. Jason sat midway down the table, hands folded, eyes darting to me, puzzled. He looked like he was trying to recognize someone from a dream. "Next on the agenda," Wendell announced, "we have a presentation from Jason Carter regarding potential expansion into Asian markets." Jason stood, straightened his tie, and stepped up to the podium. I held my breath. His presentation was smooth. Numbers, maps, projections. His voice carried confidence, but I could hear the strain behind it. He wanted this. He wanted approval. And worse, he thought this was the way to earn it. As you can see, he concluded, we estimate a 27% return within the first 18 months. Logan chimed in, stepping in like a showman. My consultancy is uniquely positioned to ensure immediate success in Tokyo and Seoul. Our network minimizes risk. I cleared my throat. The room stilled. Mr. Carter, I said, voice even, your projections are optimistic. Could you clarify your risk mitigation plan for currency volatility and regulatory barriers? Jason blinked. Brittany and I mean your financial fallback, I continued. If this expansion fails, how does Carter Tech recover? What's the exit strategy? He looked to Brittany. She gave him nothing. Logan shifted in his seat, jaw tight. There's still the matter of the controlling shareholder, someone murmured. We'd need majority approval to even greenlight this. Brittany's voice sliced through the air. With all due respect, Mr. Wilson, whoever you are, you don't know this company the way Jason does. You've never stepped foot in this building. I smiled. Oh, darling, if you only knew. This company has been my business far longer than you realize, I said, folding my hands. Brittany flushed. Jason has earned this position. He's ready to lead. I'm not questioning his effort, I said. I'm questioning the external influence. My eyes landed on Logan. David, I said flatly, on purpose, using the wrong name. It's Logan, he corrected. Ah, I replied, easily forgotten. There were stifled chuckles. I move we table this proposal until further due diligence is done, I said. We need full transparency before we commit millions to speculative growth. Wendell looked around the room. All in favor? Hands rose, even Jason's, though hesitantly. The proposal was tabled. The meeting adjourned, and Brittany swept out, red heels clacking like gunshots. Jason stayed seated. I approached him. Mr. Carter, I said carefully, you're clearly passionate, but passion requires clarity. You're capable of more than being someone else's pawn. He looked at me, searching my face. Do I know you? He asked. Perhaps in passing, I said gently. I knew your father. Jason's lips parted slightly. But before he could respond, Margot was at my elbow. Time to go, she whispered. We made waves. In the elevator, I leaned against the wall and exhaled. That, I murmured, was harder than I thought. But powerful, Margot said. You just saved the company from $1 million mistake. And Jason? I asked. He's thinking, she replied. And when he does, he'll remember. I stared out at the gray skyline as the elevator descended. Brittany thought she'd cornered the boardroom. She didn't realize the boardroom had been mine all along. I hadn't expected the knock at my door so soon, not after that boardroom shakeup. But sure enough, that evening, there he was. Jason stood on my porch, rain clinging to his coat, a folder under his arm, and a storm brewing behind his eyes. I opened the door slowly. Jason, I said, surprised but somehow not. Were you ever going to tell me? He asked, his voice tight. No greeting, just pain. I stepped back, letting him in without a word. He walked past me, dripping slightly on the rug Thomas and I had picked out 25 years ago. He turned in the hallway, folder still in hand. Is it true? He asked. Are you Mr. Wilson? I looked him in the eyes and nodded. Yes. His jaw clenched. So all this time you've owned the company? You've been watching me from the shadows like some sort of test proctor? I didn't flinch. It wasn't a test. It was a promise. He stared at me, trying to decide whether to believe that. I motioned to the living room. "Let me explain, please." He sat stiffly, not removing his coat. I sat across from him, knees barely touching. Between us, the folder trembled in his lap. "Your father," I began, "made me promise not to tell you. He wanted you to succeed on your own merit." He said, "I know what he said," Jason snapped. "Gerald filled me in." My breath caught. So Gerald had told him everything. Maybe that was for the best. Jason opened the folder and pulled out a sheet. "You've been attending board meetings through Margot for years," he said. "You've been voting, influencing, guiding, and not once did you say a word to me." I nodded slowly. "Because you didn't need me to. You were doing fine on your own." He laughed bitterly. "Was I? Or were you just letting me think I was?" "That wasn't my intention," I said softly. He stood pacing now. "You let Brittany walk all over you. You let me treat you like a dependent, like some charity case. And all the while you could have, God, Mom, you could have bought that retirement home outright. You could have stopped all of this." "I was honoring your father," I whispered. "And you." His face crumpled a little, but he didn't sit back down. "Brittany's furious. She says you tanked my presentation out of spite." "She's wrong," I said. "I did it to protect you. And the company. That proposal was built on sand, Jason. And Logan Barrett, he's worse." He looked away. "Have you even looked into Logan's past?" I asked. Jason didn't answer. "I have," I continued. 3 failed ventures, 1 bankruptcy, a history of inflating numbers and convincing young execs to push through dangerous expansions in exchange for consultant contracts." Jason exhaled slowly. "Brittany said it was an opportunity, that we needed to act fast. She said the board would respect bold moves." "Bold doesn't mean reckless," I said. "And she doesn't care about the board. She cares about image. That house in Lakewood Estates, that was never for you." His silence was telling. "And what about me?" I asked gently. "Do you think I was wrong to stay silent all these years?" He looked at me then. Truly looked. Something softened behind his eyes. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm confused, angry, embarrassed." "That's fair." He hesitated. "But I'm not sure Brittany's the only one I should be angry with." "No," I agreed. "You're right. I should have told you sooner, especially when she started driving a wedge between us." Jason sat back down, quieter now. "She's been pushing hard for another board vote," he muttered. "Wants to restructure the executive team, get rid of Wendell, push Margot out completely." "She's positioning herself," I said, "and Logan's whispering in her ear." Jason rubbed his eyes. "They've been in meetings, private ones. I thought they were just networking." "No," I said gently. "They're planning something bigger. And they're using you." His voice broke a little. "God, Mom. Was I that blind?" "We all are, sometimes," I said, "especially when we want to believe the best in people." Jason nodded slowly. "What do I do?" "Start by reading what's in that folder. There's proof, names, contracts, everything you need to see Brittany and Logan for what they are." He didn't open it right then, just held it tighter. "I need time," he said, "to think." "Take all the time you need," I said. "But Jason, be careful. Brittany's not going to back down quietly." He gave me a look, one I hadn't seen in years. The look of a boy who used to think I had all the answers. "I've already packed a bag," he admitted. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight. I need space. I nodded. I understand. He stood again, slower this time. I'll call you tomorrow. I walked him to the door, watched him step into the dark. As he walked down the path, I remembered the first time I watched him walk away. His first day of kindergarten. Backpack too big for his shoulders. Shoes untied. Now here he was. A man tied to a woman who'd tried to cut him off from the truth, from his legacy. From me. I locked the door behind him, turned off the lights, and poured a glass of wine. I knew what was coming next. Brittany wouldn't go quietly. She'd push. She'd scheme. She'd do what people like her always do when the walls start closing in. Fight dirty. But I wasn't scared of her anymore. Elaine Carter, the so-called Leech Maid, had teeth. And she was about to bite back. The phone rang just after sunrise. I'd barely slept, too many thoughts cartwheeling in my head, too many what-ifs digging into the soft corners of memory. It was Gerald. "Elaine," he said without preamble, "we have a situation." My stomach tightened. Brittany, he corrected quickly, has convinced Jason to call an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. Restructuring vote. I blinked into my cold coffee. That fast? She's not wasting time, he said. And there's more. I braced myself. She hired a private investigator. After the last meeting, she's connected you to Mr. Wilson. The room spun just a little. I reached for the edge of the counter. How? How did she make the leap? I don't know, Gerald said, his voice calm but clipped. But Jason called Margot this morning. He asked her point blank if you were Mr. Wilson. She didn't answer, but he's suspicious, angry. My heart sank. I was going to tell him tonight. You may not have that luxury, Gerald said. The doorbell rang. A long, impatient press. I already knew who it was. I'll call you back, I whispered. Through the peephole, Jason, his jaw set, that same tight expression he'd worn after his first car accident, when he'd sworn he hadn't been speeding but he knew he had. I opened the door. Jason, I said instinctively. He pushed past me into the house. Were you ever going to tell me? Or was the plan to keep lying forever? I closed the door quietly and turned to face him. His chest rose and fell. I was going to tell you tonight, I said. He laughed bitterly. Oh, perfect timing. Right before the trapdoor drops. Jason. No, Jason. I want the truth. All of it, right now. So I gave it to him. I told him about Carter Tech's beginning, about the 2 desks in that dusty storage room, about sleepless nights and budget groceries and writing software at the kitchen table, about Thomas's diagnosis, his wish, his promise. I told him about the trust, about the shares, about the years I watched him climb the ladder with pride and restraint, about how Brittany changed everything. He didn't interrupt. He didn't even blink. When I finished, the room fell quiet except for the tick of the old wall clock. Jason finally sat down on the edge of the couch, running both hands through his hair. I feel like my life just got rewritten, he said. I understand. No, you don't, he snapped. I thought I knew who I was, what I'd built, but it was all staged. I've been working inside a legacy I didn't even know I inherited. You built your career on merit, I said gently. That was never fake. But the foundation was, he said, voice rising. Everything was carefully managed, filtered, and you, my own mother, you were behind the curtain the whole time. I wasn't manipulating you, I said. I was honoring your father, and I was protecting you. From doubt, from entitlement. He shook his head. From the truth. He stood again, pacing. And now Brittany knows. She says you torpedoed the expansion proposal because you were jealous, that you've been controlling everything from the shadows. I clenched my jaw. Brittany's wrong. And she knows it. She says you'll ruin my future with the board. That you'll embarrass me again tomorrow. I crossed the room slowly and opened the folder Gerald had left with me. I pulled out the file labeled Logan Barrett, History, and handed it to him. She's using you, I said, and she's planning something bigger than just a board shuffle. He didn't take the file right away. I thought I could trust her, he said. I know. She said she believed in me. I know, I said again. He finally took the folder and opened it. Page after page of company logos, failed ventures, investor lawsuits, and shady partnerships fell before him like dominoes. This is real? He asked, stunned. 3 companies went under after partnering with Logan. 1 filed for bankruptcy. 1 is still in litigation. Jason sank back onto the couch, the papers trembling in his lap. I let her get so close, he whispered. She told me the board was old-fashioned, that you were holding me back. She said the promotion would make everything better. I sat beside him. Promotions don't fix broken loyalties. He looked at me sideways. You've got one-liners now? I smiled faintly. Old people wisdom. Comes with the cardigans. He let out a breath that might have been half a laugh. I'm sorry, I said after a moment, for not telling you sooner, for letting this go so far. He stared at the carpet. And if I hadn't called this board meeting tomorrow? She'd have done it anyway, I said. But you've got time. You can stop it. And you? He asked. Are you showing up again as Mr. Wilson? I shook my head. No, I'm showing up as me, Elaine Carter. No disguise, no proxy. He closed the folder. She's going to fight hard. I'm not afraid of her anymore, I said. Jason turned to me, something behind his eyes cracking open. Am I a good man, Mom? He asked softly. You're a good man who made a mistake, I said, and that's how you'll become better. He reached over and touched my hand. I'm not sure what's going to happen tomorrow. Neither am I said, but we're going to walk in there together. Setter. He nodded. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Brittany. Just 2 words. He knows. Jason stared at it for a long moment. Then he put the phone down, face hardening. She's already moving to Plan B. What do you want to do? I asked. He stood. I want to walk in there and remind everyone who really built this company. And I want her to know she doesn't get to define me anymore. I smiled. Now that sounds like your father talking. Jason took one last look around the living room, then at me. See you at 9 a.m., Mrs. Carter, he said. I watched him walk out into the night again, but this time his shoulders were square, his head was high. And I realized something. Maybe I hadn't just saved the company. Maybe I was finally getting my son back. The next morning arrived draped in fog, as if the city itself were holding its breath. I wore a simple navy suit, nothing flashy, but tailored to command quiet authority. My silver hair, freshly styled, framed my face with calm control. No more personas, no more Mr. Wilson. Today I would walk into the boardroom as Elaine Carter, the true architect of Carter Tech. Margot picked me up at 8 o'clock sharp. You ready? She asked as I settled into the passenger seat. As ready as I'll ever be. She nodded. I talked to Gerald. He says half the board already has concerns about the restructuring proposal. Half isn't enough, I murmured. She gave me a knowing look. Then let's sway the rest. The boardroom on the 28th floor felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the tension coiled beneath the polished oak table. Every seat was filled. A few senior staffers lingered by the coffee station, whispering as they cast curious glances my way. Jason sat near the center of the long table, spine straight, expression unreadable. Beside him, Brittany wore a pale cream blazer, immaculate and smug. Logan Barrett, all charm and expensive cologne, sat at her other side. I took the empty chair opposite Jason, nodded politely to the board members, and opened my leather folder. Brittany didn't even try to hide her disdain. I wasn't aware guests were allowed at internal restructuring meetings, she said, loud enough to echo. I met her gaze, steady as stone. I'm not a guest. Richard, the chairman, cleared his throat. Let's begin, shall we? Jason stood. His voice was calm, measured. Before we address the agenda, I'd like to make a correction, he began. The purpose of this meeting has changed. Brittany's head snapped toward him. I've reviewed recent findings regarding Mr. Barrett's consultancy history and potential conflicts of interest, Jason continued. Additionally, I've reconsidered the necessity and timing of the proposed executive restructuring. The murmurs began. Logan's face tightened. Brittany's smile curdled. Richard leaned forward. Mr. Carter, are you withdrawing your motion? Jason nodded. I am. Just like that, Brittany snapped, her voice rising. After all the preparation, after the late nights, after dash. After I realized I was being used, Jason interrupted. The room went dead silent. Brittany blinked. Jason turned toward the board. I've come to understand that certain individuals have been manipulating me, my position, and this company. I won't allow that to continue. Logan stood, a plastic smile stretched across his face. Jason, I think we should discuss this privately. No, Jason said. We'll do it here, with everyone present. Logan looked to Brittany for help, but she sat frozen. I've reviewed Mr. Barrett's past affiliations, Jason continued, lifting the folder I had given him. 3 companies, 3 collapses, 1 bankruptcy. And all of them, just like this one, began with a flashy proposal and a consultant promising golden returns. Someone at the end of the table let out a low whistle. Jason placed the folder down. This isn't how my father built Carter Tech. It's not how I intend to run it. Brittany's voice turned ice cold. You're going to let your mother dictate your career? Jason didn't even flinch. I'm going to let my conscience dictate my integrity. She rose from her chair, trembling with rage. This is absurd. She's been lying to you your whole life. She's been sitting on millions, letting you slave away, pretending to be poor while controlling everything. The board members shifted uncomfortably. You don't understand, Jason said softly. She wasn't hiding power. She was honoring a promise. To what? Brittany spat. To keep her son in the dark like a fool? No, Jason said. To let me become a man on my own terms. He turned to me. You should say something. I hesitated, then stood. I've remained silent for 5 years, I said quietly, out of love, not deceit. But I won't stay quiet any longer. I looked around the room, meeting each gaze. My name is Elaine Carter. I own 51% of this company. I co-founded it with my husband, Thomas Carter, in a rented storage room with 2 desks and a dream. I've watched from the sidelines while others took credit, while my son grew into the kind of man his father always believed he could become. I turned to Brittany. You called me a leech. You thought I was dead weight, but I am the bones beneath this company, and I will not let you poison it for your own gain. Brittany took a shaky breath. You think you can just walk in here and take everything? I smiled gently. I don't have to take anything. I already own it. Logan tried again. This company needs innovation, global reach. We were offering that. At what cost? I asked. Your last 3 ventures collapsed. You left behind lawsuits, layoffs, and shattered reputations. I won't let Carter Tech become another casualty. Richard looked around the room. I think we've heard enough. Jason cleared his throat. I move that we permanently sever ties with Barrett Consulting and table any future restructuring proposals until they've been properly reviewed. One by one, hands went up. Unanimous. Even the ones Brittany had assumed were in her pocket. She stood motionless, as if trying to compute the impossible. This isn't over, she hissed. Jason turned to her. Yes, Brittany. It is. Logan grabbed his briefcase and stormed out. Brittany followed, her heels clicking like gunshots down the hallway. The board began to rise, murmuring, shaking hands. Margot leaned toward me. You did it. I exhaled for the first time in hours. Jason came around the table. For a moment, he just looked at me, searching maybe, or simply seeing me for the first time. Then, he hugged me. Thank you, he said, for everything. And for the first time in years, I believed we might actually be okay. The days that followed felt oddly quiet. Brittany was gone, technically still in Jason's life, but emotionally and physically removed. She hadn't returned to their condo since the board meeting. Her designer wardrobe remained untouched in their walk-in closet, like silk ghosts clinging to hangers. But her presence still hovered, invisible but heavy. Jason moved into the guest house behind my home. At first, he said it was temporary, just a place to think, to figure some things out. But I noticed how he stopped checking his phone every 5 minutes, how he started having coffee with me in the mornings, how the shadows beneath his eyes began to fade. One morning, we sat together on the porch swing, the garden still slick with dew. My hands wrapped around a warm mug, his arms stretched along the backrest, that old boyish slump creeping back into his posture. I've filed for divorce, he said quietly. I looked at him but said nothing. He needed to say it out loud. She didn't even argue, just asked if I'd cover her legal fees. That drew a bitter laugh from me, gracious as ever. He chuckled once, then paused. I keep going over everything, all the red flags, the hints, even the way she talked to you. I don't know how I didn't see it. Love makes us generous, I said gently, and blind. He nodded. It's not just her, though. I think I got caught up in titles, in keeping up. I mean, I was working so hard to be something, I forgot to ask why. I smiled softly. That's old people wisdom number 6. A career without a compass only leads to exhaustion. He smirked. That on a mug somewhere? Only in my kitchen. There was silence for a moment, but it was the good kind, the kind you settle into like warm sheets. Then Jason turned to me. I want to rebuild. Start clean. Do something that honors Dad and you and the actual purpose behind Carter Tech. I raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a pitch. It is, he admitted. I want to present a new proposal to the board. Expansion? Yes, but not overseas, not speculative. I've been researching how we could grow Carter Tech's educational division, partner with underserved schools, provide affordable software solutions, real social impact. My heart fluttered. Thomas had always dreamed of using our success to give back. Jason continued. It's not a high-return venture, at least not immediately. But it's sustainable and honest. I reached out and touched his hand. That's the man your father hoped you'd become. He swallowed hard. I'd like you to co-present it with me. That caught me off guard. Jason, I know I've made mistakes, but I want the board to see us together, not just as some symbolic gesture, but because we're stronger that way. I blinked back the sudden sting in my eyes. I'd be honored. That afternoon, we sat at the dining table, surrounded by papers, laptops, charts, and half-eaten cookies, and we built something, side by side. He brought energy and vision. I brought experience and grounding. We debated details, disagreed on phrasing, reworked timelines. We laughed. We even yelled once. But it felt good, alive. It was the first time in years that Carter Tech didn't feel like a burden or a ghost. It felt like a shared inheritance, and not just one built from money, but from meaning. Later that week, Gerald reviewed our plan and nodded. This is bold and smart. The board's going to like it. I don't want them to just like it, Jason said. I want them to believe in it. Gerald grinned. Then let's give them a reason. The next board meeting was scheduled for a rainy Thursday. Seattle was living up to its reputation, but somehow the gray skies felt more like a cleansing than a cloud. We walked in side by side, Jason in a charcoal suit, me in a burgundy one Thomas always loved. Heads turned, whispers rippled. But there was no hostility in the room, only curiosity. Jason stood first. I'd like to introduce a new strategic proposal, he began. It's built on the original mission of Carter Tech, problem-solving, ethical growth, and community impact. He gestured to me. And this time, I've asked my mother, co-founder of this company, to join me. The presentation was different. There were no gimmicks, no buzzwords, no exaggerated projections. Just data, vision, and heart. When we finished, the board was quiet. Then Richard, ever the stoic chairman, said simply, I think Thomas would have approved. That single sentence felt like an exhale across the table. The vote? Unanimous. Afterward, Margot leaned over and whispered, That was your real comeback. And she was right. Not the boardroom takedown, not the exposé. This. Building something true. That night, back at the house, Jason opened a bottle of wine and toasted. To second chances. We clinked glasses. Maybe next quarter, he said thoughtfully, we can explore scholarships tied to our software. And maybe, I added, we re-examine our hiring pipeline. Look for non-traditional tech backgrounds. Expand access. He smiled. You're not retiring anytime soon, are you? I laughed. Retirement is for people with bingo cards and early dinners. Jason leaned back in his chair, staring out the window. I never thought the best part of my career would be working with my mom. Life's funny like that, I said. Sometimes you spend years looking for your legacy, only to find it sitting across the table from you. Outside, the rain eased into a hush. Inside, we were finally rebuilding. Together. The new Carter Tech felt different. Not in a flashy, rebrand everything and order espresso machines for every floor kind of way. No, this shift was quieter. Like fresh paint in an old house, familiar, but full of new light. Jason worked out of the main office most days now, but he still came back to the guest house every evening. Sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit on the back porch in comfortable silence. We rarely talked about Brittany, That chapter had closed, and neither of us wanted to rehash it. One evening, after his presentation had been approved and the board officially welcomed him as the new executive vice president, Jason stood in the kitchen doorway, swirling a glass of orange juice like it was champagne. "I've been thinking about the name," he said, eyes fixed on the family portrait above the fireplace. "Carter Tech?" I asked, though I already knew what he meant. "Everyone associates it with Dad, and that's fair. He was the public face, the voice, the guy with the laser pointer at investor meetings, but you," he turned toward me, "you were the one behind the curtain, balancing budgets, answering phones, holding things together while raising a kid and a company." I smiled. "That was just being a wife and a mom." "No," he said, "that was being a founder. And the company should reflect both." I set down my mug. "What are you suggesting?" Jason hesitated, then said, "Carter and Wilson Technologies." The name landed like a warm blanket. I hadn't heard Wilson in a long time. Not since those anonymous board meetings where I played the role of Mr. Wilson, the invisible proxy who protected the company while hiding in plain sight. "I like it," I said softly. "It's poetic." Jason chuckled. "Poetic's good, right? As long as the lawyers don't hate it. They'll survive." We submitted the rebranding proposal the following week. The board approved it without debate. For many of them, the story behind Wilson had become legend. Now it was public, and proudly so. The press caught wind of it quickly. Mother behind the curtain. Elaine Carter steps into the spotlight at renamed Carter and Wilson Technologies. The headline ran alongside a photo of Jason and me standing side by side at a community tech fair we sponsored that month. He looked relaxed, confident. I looked seen. That weekend, we hosted a small company picnic at a park near the original Carter Tech building, a drab, now condemned office space that once held our dreams, and a second-hand desk with a coffee ring the size of Texas. Dozens of employees showed up with families. There were toddlers doing cartwheels on the grass, interns tossing cornhole bags, and a few surprised former board members watching me grill veggie burgers like a pro. "Elaine," called Margot, balancing a paper plate of potato salad. "You gonna run the three-legged race?" "Only if the prize is a nap," I replied. She laughed and sat beside me. "You know what I've always admired about you? That I can calculate profit margins while peeling potatoes." "That too, but mostly your ability to stay human through it all. You never lost your empathy." I looked around at the picnic tables and the easy smiles. It took almost losing everything to realize I never wanted to be anything else. Later, Jason wandered over holding 2 snow cones, lime and cherry. "Guess which is your favorite?" he asked. "You still remember?" He handed me the lime. "You're predictable, Mom. Like clockwork and spreadsheets. Don't forget Bridge Club." "Actually," he said, "I finally figured out what your Bridge Club was." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Your monthly financial check-ins, with Gerald, under the radar. You played dumb for years." "I didn't play," I smirked. "I excelled at pretending not to know what I knew." He laughed, then turned serious. "I'm proud of you, you know." That brought me up short. "No one ever says that to moms," he added. "Not enough, anyway." I blinked away a tear and nudged his arm. "I'm proud of you, too." By the time the sun started to dip behind the trees, the park glowed with that golden light only summer evenings can pull off. Jason stood up, brushing grass from his slacks. "I should get going. I'm meeting with the software team early tomorrow to finalize the first pilot rollout." "Already?" I teased. "Weren't you just celebrating your promotion last week?" "No rest for the reformed," he quipped. He took a step, then paused. "Oh, one more thing. I've asked HR to start a mentorship initiative, pairing senior team members with young professionals from marginalized communities. Real training, long-term. My chest swelled. That's the kind of change that sticks, I said. He nodded. That's the kind of legacy I want to leave behind. As I watched him walk toward his car, keys in hand, I thought back to that first company party, the one where Brittany had laughed at my handbag and called me the Leech. If she could see me now, she'd probably choke on her foie gras. But it wasn't revenge that filled my heart. It was something deeper. Peace. Closure. The quiet joy of knowing I had taken every insult, every slight, and turned it into something that could never be taken from me. Not wealth, but dignity. Jason's silhouette disappeared behind the steering wheel, and I waved from the porch. He honked twice, a tradition from his high school days, and drove off into the evening. Tomorrow, Carter and Wilson Technologies would launch its new initiative. And me? I had a bridge club meeting to prepare for. Only this time, everyone knew exactly who I was. The next morning, I awoke earlier than usual. Not from nerves, not from excitement, just from habit. That's the thing about being the matriarch of something like Carter and Wilson. You don't wait for the world to greet you. You open the door first. I padded into the kitchen in my robe and slippers, same ones I've had for over a decade, and brewed a pot of coffee. The scent alone felt like an old friend, steady, bold, slightly bitter. Like me, on a good day. By 7 a.m., I was reviewing emails on my tablet, squinting at the light, when a notification caught my eye. Subject: urgent. Meeting called by Brittany Wilkes, formerly Carter. I blinked. Brittany? I clicked into the message. Sure enough, she'd managed to call a shareholder meeting using her minimal stake, something she'd retained, likely from a prenup clause Jason had been too kind to fight. The agenda? Vague. But the meeting was set for noon at a downtown law office. She wasn't done. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and tapped the rim of my coffee mug. There was a part of me that wanted to ignore it. Let the lawyers handle her. Let her make a fool of herself trying to claw back relevance. But another part, the part of me that once sat on folding chairs in our garage dreaming up company names with Thomas, knew better. This wasn't just about business. This was about our story, about protecting what we'd built from being tainted by ego, greed, or petty desperation. By 9 a.m., I was dressed in what I call my power compromise, a tailored navy pantsuit and my comfortable loafers. The gold watch Thomas gave me ticked softly on my wrist, a rhythm I'd grown used to counting on. Jason pulled up just as I locked the front door. "You got the email?" he asked. I nodded. She's not going to go quietly. She never does. We drove in silence for most of the trip downtown, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. When we parked, Jason turned to me and said, "Whatever she's planning, just know. I'm not going back. Not to her. Not to who I was with her." I smiled, reaching over to straighten his collar like I had before every school picture. "I know, sweetheart. But this time, you're not facing it alone." The law firm's boardroom was sleek, sterile, and smelled faintly of lemon polish. Brittany was already seated at the far end in a white blazer that was probably meant to make her look angelic. It didn't work. Her expression was tight, performative. "Elaine, Jason," she said, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for coming. I didn't think you'd actually show." "I find surprises tedious," I said, taking a seat opposite her. "Better to meet them head on." Her attorney, a young man with a too expensive haircut, cleared his throat. "Miss, Wilkes has a proposal." "Of course she does," Jason muttered. Brittany folded her hands and launched into a speech that would have impressed a community theater coach. I believe that, despite our recent complications, we have an opportunity. Carter and Wilson is on the cusp of major transformation. With the right direction, it could scale faster, expand bolder, and even go public. Jason's jaw tensed. You mean hand it to venture capitalists? It's what companies do when they grow up, she said, sipping from a glass of cucumber water. And I believe my network and my vision could help guide that process. I leaned forward. Brittany, darling, are you suggesting that you, fresh off a failed marriage, a failed coup, and a failed board manipulation, should help us run our company? Her smile faltered for just a second. I'm offering a second chance, she said flatly, one that benefits all of us. Jason sat back, arms crossed. How exactly does this benefit us? Brittany glanced at her lawyer. If I'm not given a seat on the board and a formal acknowledgement of my contributions during my marriage to Jason, I'll consider disclosing certain private details to the press, including your mother's years of financial secrecy. Is that a threat? Jason asked. A strategy, she replied coolly. I looked at her for a long moment. This was the girl who once whispered to her friends during Thanksgiving dinner that my green bean casserole was adorably rustic, who treated me like a stray cat Jason refused to stop feeding. You've made your move, I said. Now let me make mine. I reached into my bag and slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside are the findings from a private investigator. Yours, actually. The one you hired to dig into my background. Turns out, he was more loyal to the highest bidder. Her fingers hesitated before opening it. When she did, color drained from her face. These are texts between you and Logan Barrett, I continued. Emails. Financial records showing your attempts to shift funds from Carter and Wilson into a shell account tied to his firm. Brittany's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I believe the word is embezzlement. Her lawyer looked physically ill. Jason spoke next, voice low but firm. You will drop this meeting. You will forfeit all claims to the company, and in return, we won't press charges. She stood abruptly, clutching the envelope. You don't scare me. No, I said gently. But the FBI's white-collar crimes division might. She left without another word, heels clicking like an angry metronome. Outside, the clouds were beginning to part. Jason exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. You're terrifying, he said. I linked my arm through his. It's one of my better qualities. As we drove back through the Seattle streets, my thoughts turned not to Brittany or Logan or lawsuits, but to legacy. Not the one written on stock certificates or press releases. The one you earn when you refuse to be erased. That night, I sat alone on the porch, wine in hand, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. I thought of Thomas, of all the battles we fought, of the love that built Carter and Wilson, and I whispered aloud, just once. She's gone, darling. We're safe. The wind responded in soft hushes. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The next few days passed like a slow exhale, calm, still, but full of that odd tension, like the quiet after a thunderstorm, where the air's thick with aftermath. Brittany had vanished. Her lawyer sent over a signed agreement relinquishing any stake, claim, or further involvement with Carter and Wilson Technologies. No board seat, no public spectacle. In exchange, we agreed not to pursue legal action. It was clean, clinical, too easy, really. But I wasn't complaining. The board, relieved, moved swiftly. They issued a quiet press statement about internal restructuring, and began setting up the mentorship initiative Jason had envisioned. Word around the office was hopeful, lighter. Even the receptionist who once judged my thrift store jacket now offered me a bright, "Good morning, Ms. Carter," whenever I passed. One morning, Jason joined me on the porch with 2 steaming mugs. "Thought you could use a break from Bridge Club budget wars." "I'm always at war with decimal points," I said, smiling. He looked tired, but not the bone-deep exhaustion I'd seen when he was under Brittany's thumb. This was the good kind, the kind that came from purpose. "So," I asked, sipping, "how are you, really?" Jason stared into the steam. "Free, but hollow, you know?" I nodded. "Grief doesn't only come after death. Sometimes it shows up after truth." He glanced at me. "That's one of your old lady wisdom things, isn't it?" "Copyright pending," I smirked. "I'll send you the invoice." We sat in silence for a while, watching the squirrels chase each other across the fence. I could feel him turning something over in his mind. Finally, he said, "I found the ring." I looked at him. Brittany's engagement ring. She left it in the drawer next to my passport, just sitting there. "That sounds like her," I said quietly. "Dramatic exits in stilettos." He chuckled once, then shook his head. "Thing is, I stared at it for 10 minutes. Not because I missed her, but because I realized I never really knew her at all." "That's the thing with manipulators," I said. "They're mirrors. They show you what you want to see, until you forget to look for the cracks." Jason frowned. Was I that blind? "No," I said. "You were that hopeful." He absorbed that. Then, almost to himself, he said, "I don't know how to date again. I mean, what do I even put in a profile? Recently divorced from a sociopath who tried to dismantle my company, loves spreadsheets and panic attacks?" I burst out laughing. "You forgot Mom's favorite son. I'm your only son." "Still your best qualification." He rolled his eyes, but he was smiling now. Later that afternoon, Jason called Margot into his office. He wanted her insight on employee wellness programs. I watched from the hallway as the two of them talked, Margot with her glasses perched low on her nose, Jason nodding with genuine interest. It was like seeing Thomas in a mirror. Not just his looks, but the way he listened, the way he made people feel heard. Back at home, I found myself flipping through old photo albums. Not out of nostalgia, more like confirmation, proof that the journey had happened, that we really had started with nothing but dreams and duct tape. One photo caught me. Jason, at 5, covered in chocolate cake, holding a cardboard sign that said, "Future CEO." I traced the edges of the image. Maybe, deep down, he always knew. The next day, Carter and Wilson held its quarterly Vision and Values presentation, a tradition we'd begun before Thomas passed. Jason stood at the front of the auditorium, no slides behind him, just a microphone and a story. "I grew up thinking my parents were just regular folks," he said. "My dad fixed computers, my mom made casseroles and managed our household. What I didn't know, what I didn't understand, was that they were building something the whole time, something massive, something meaningful." The room was silent. Every employee leaned in. "My mother," he continued, "is the reason this company exists, and she's the reason it's still standing." He looked toward me in the front row. "Elaine Carter taught me that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers from behind the scenes. And sometimes it walks into a boardroom dressed as Mr. Wilson and saves you from yourself." The crowd laughed. I blushed. Not from embarrassment, from recognition. I've made mistakes, Jason admitted. I lost sight of what matters. But we're here today not to dwell on that, but to build something better, smarter, kinder. And we'll do it the way this company was always meant to run, together. When he finished, the standing ovation was instant. Not polite, not forced. Just raw, grateful energy. Afterward, I met him backstage. "You've gotten better at speeches," I said, wiping at a tear. "Learned from the best," he replied. We walked outside, sunlight bouncing off the windows. "Hey, Mom," he said suddenly. "Can I ask you something weird?" "You once tried to eat sidewalk chalk, Jason." "Nothing you say surprises me anymore." He grinned. "Do you think Dad knows?" "About all this? About how it turned out?" I looked up at the sky, a breeze brushing through my hair. "I think he does," I said softly. "And I think he's somewhere laughing that you finally realized your mother was right all along." Jason nodded. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." "You're welcome," I replied. "Now go change the world, just not all at once." As he walked away, I stood still for a long time. Elaine Carter, once called a leech, once dismissed, underestimated, and nearly erased. Now, a name on the building. A legacy etched not just in stocks or software, but in the soul of a company that finally saw her for who she was. And it felt damn good. A week later, Jason surprised me again. "Mom," he said over Sunday breakfast, blueberry pancakes and black coffee, "I want to do something with the house." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "The one I live in, or the one you haven't finished moving out of?" He smirked. "Both, actually." I set the fork down. "Go on." "I was thinking about converting the Lakewood house into something useful, like a Carter and Wilson Fellowship Hub, a place for young entrepreneurs, especially those who didn't come from privilege, to get mentorship, seed funding, maybe even housing if they need it." I blinked, stunned. "You want to turn the home your ex-wife picked for her Pinterest dreams into a startup incubator?" He shrugged. "Poetic, right?" I chuckled. "That might be the best revenge I've ever heard of." Jason leaned back in his chair. "I've been doing a lot of reflecting. I realized I got so caught up in what I thought I should be, VP, homeowner, husband, that I stopped asking who I actually wanted to become." "And who's that?" I asked, folding my napkin. "Someone who builds things that last. Not just apps or profit margins, but people, ideas, purpose." I sat there, my chest tightening in that way it does when joy and nostalgia collide. "Thomas would be proud," I said quietly. He smiled. "I hope so." After breakfast, we drove over to the Lakewood house. Brittany's designer touch was everywhere. Marble counters, gold hardware, mirrors shaped like sunbursts. But something about it felt empty. All surface, no soul. "Once we remove the wine cellar," Jason said, "we can open the space for a workshop room. Maybe host community events in the atrium." I walked through the rooms slowly, picturing young dreamers sitting at long wooden tables, sketching prototypes or pitching ideas. I imagined laughter echoing off the walls where only silence had lived since Brittany left. We left with a plan and a checklist, and a new contractor named Gloria who called everyone sugar and wore steel-toed boots with rhinestones. That night, back at my house, I curled up with my journal, the same one I'd used to track Carter Tech's very first expenses: staplers, used laptops, coffee. I wrote, "Legacy isn't about who remembers your name. It's about who thrives because you dared to start something." The following Monday, Jason scheduled a private meeting with the board. We were in the main conference room again, the city skyline behind us, the table polished to a shine. Jason stood at the head, not as a man trying to prove himself, but as a leader who finally knew who he was. "I have a proposal," he began, "not for a product, not for a partnership, but for our name." There was a ripple of surprise across the table. I know Carter and Wilson has history, but that second name, Wilson, it was never a man. It was my mother, Elaine Carter, who built this company with my father, guided it quietly for years, and stepped forward when we needed her most. All eyes turned to me. I didn't shift, didn't smile, just looked back, calm and steady. "I think it's time we stop pretending she was a silent partner," Jason continued. "She wasn't silent. She was strategic. And from now on, I want the company to reflect both founders equally." He pulled off the cover of a foam board beside him. Printed in elegant serif letters was a new logo, Carter and Elaine Technologies. My breath caught. "It's not flashy," Jason added, "but it's right." The vote was unanimous. After the meeting, Richard, the board chair, walked over. "I've seen a lot of name changes in my career," he said. "But this one? This feels earned." Jason and I stood together in the hallway after everyone else had gone. "Are you sure?" I asked. He nodded. "The world should know who you are, Mom." I swallowed hard. I liked Mr. Wilson, you know. He had style. Jason laughed. "Yeah, but Elaine Carter? She's unforgettable." That weekend, we held a small event to unveil the new brand. No media circus, just friends, longtime employees, and family, people who knew the story, who were the story. There was cake shaped like the original Carter Tech logo, and a slideshow of photos, me and Thomas in the garage, Jason as a baby in a onesie that read, "Future CEO," even Margot asleep at her desk during a 2003 product launch. After the toast, someone handed me the microphone. I hadn't planned to speak, but some words come whether you prepare or not. "Thank you all," I said, voice trembling just a little. "Not just for being here tonight, but for believing in the power of beginnings. Because every great story starts small, sometimes in a garage, sometimes in silence, sometimes behind the scenes." I paused, scanning the crowd. Jason was near the front, glass raised, pride glowing in his eyes. "I was called a leech once," I continued. "Someone who clung too tightly, who had nothing of her own. But the truth is, I never clung. I built. I loved. I fought. And I endured. And now I get to stand here, not as a footnote, but as a founder." Applause filled the room. Jason stepped up beside me, his arm around my shoulder. And just like that, a new chapter began, not one written by Brittany or buried in someone else's ego, but forged by truth, resilience, and the quiet strength of a woman who never stopped believing in what she started. The month after the rebrand, I noticed a shift. Not just in Jason, but in the entire company. Departments that once kept their heads down were suddenly collaborating across teams. The R&D wing, quiet for months, was buzzing again, full of messy whiteboards, bad coffee, and contagious optimism. Even the janitor, Harold, who'd been with us since the first office, seemed to walk a little taller. One morning, Jason came to me, eyes bright. "Mom," he said, skipping coffee entirely, which, for him, was borderline alarming. I think I've figured out the new expansion direction. I leaned back on the porch swing. If it involves crypto or 3D printed meat, I'm out. He grinned. Educational tech, community-centered, hybrid software that bridges remote learning with localized support. I raised an eyebrow. Not sexy, but smart. That's our new motto, he chuckled. The plan wasn't about chasing unicorn valuations or international blitzes. It was about using our strengths, interface design, user experience, cloud infrastructure, and applying them to help underserved schools and students. It's scalable, Jason explained, pacing. But more importantly, it's sustainable. We can start in the Northwest, partner with community colleges, create software that actually listens to educators, not just investors. He was excited in the way Thomas used to get before a product launch. That quiet fire. We looped in Margot and her old team, many of whom had retired but agreed to consult. Gerald helped draft the first proposal. And I sat in the corner, knitting a sweater I'd never finish, and smiling like a woman watching her garden bloom. Jason called the project CWE, Carter and Elaine Education. Subtle, powerful, purpose-driven. The first school pilot launched 2 weeks later in Tacoma, Washington. The reviews were immediate and glowing. Teachers loved the intuitive dashboards. Students praised the gamified modules. Parents emailed us with something I hadn't seen in years: gratitude. One note said, "For once, it feels like someone listened." Meanwhile, Jason, who had once struggled to speak at meetings without cue cards, presented CWE at a local education tech summit. He stood there in jeans and a blazer. No slides, just heart. "We forgot," he said, "that education isn't a business. It's a foundation. This isn't about growth metrics. It's about giving people the tools to grow themselves." He received a standing ovation. Later that week, we sat in my living room, him with a craft beer, me with lemon tea, and debriefed. "You know," he said, "I used to think power meant corner offices and job titles. Now I think it's knowing who you are when no one's watching." I nodded. True power is quiet, like gravity. You don't see it, but everything moves because of it. He raised his glass. To invisible forces. I tapped my mug. To things that finally come into the light. A few days later, we got a letter from the governor's office. They wanted to explore a public-private partnership with CWE pilot programs. Funding. Jason didn't panic. He simply said, "Let's make sure we can handle the scale without forgetting the soul." That night, I found him in his old room, now his temporary office, sifting through our family photo albums again. "This one," he said, pointing to a yellowed Polaroid. "This is what I want the company to remember." It was a photo of Thomas in a folding chair, soldering a circuit board on our kitchen table, with baby Jason in a carrier beside him. "That's our legacy," Jason whispered. "Not stock options, not awards, just building something that lasts." He asked if he could use it in the next company-wide newsletter. I told him I'd scan it. He shook his head. "No, I want the original, tape and all." And just like that, Carter and Elaine Technologies stopped being a corporation and became a story. Employees told new hires, the founder used to come in disguised as a shareholder. They called it the Wilson Gambit. HR made it a trivia question at onboarding. A mural appeared in the break room, Elaine and Thomas Carter in black and white, tools in hand, with the quote underneath, "We didn't just build tech, we built trust." Jason began spending his weekends speaking at high schools, offering scholarships, mentorship, and, occasionally, grilling hot dogs at community fundraisers. "Never thought I'd see you in an apron," I teased one afternoon. He grinned, flipping a bratwurst. You're not the only Carter who can multitask. Life got quieter in a beautiful way. One evening, Jason came in from the garden, hands dirty, hair wind-blown. Mom, he said, you ever think about traveling? I looked up from my book. I've traveled. I went to Boise once. He laughed. I mean now. You've been holding this place together for years. You ever just want to see something new? I closed the book. You offering to take over the garden while I sip wine in France? He tilted his head. That, or we go together. I stared at him. I mean it, he said. 2 weeks, Italy, museums, pasta, history. I blinked back a sudden wave of emotion. Jason Carter, I said slowly. Are you asking your mother on a vacation? He smiled. I figure it's about time I take you to dinner. I stood, walked over, and hugged him. Really hugged him, in that way you do when the past finally lets go of your spine. Pack your bags, I whispered, and no suits. As he walked away, I looked around our little living room. Threadbare, loved, permanent. I thought about legacy, about beginnings, about how we write the future, not in grand gestures, but in everyday choices. And I knew, without doubt, that Thomas was watching, smiling, proud. Because the company we started wasn't just surviving anymore. It was becoming. The flight to Italy was long, but Jason insisted on splurging for first class. Considerate interest, he said, on 35 years of unpaid CEO labor. I'd never seen him so relaxed. Shoes off, movie queued up, face unburdened. I guess that's what happens when you finally cut loose the anchor of pretending to be someone you're not. We landed in Florence, and from the first cobbled street, I felt 20 years younger. There was something about the light, the way it filtered through narrow alleys, how the buildings looked like they had stories etched in their bricks. We stayed at a small inn overlooking the Arno River. The owner's name was Julia, and she had an uncanny ability to appear exactly when I needed more biscotti. On our third day, we visited a centuries-old workshop where artisans still made paper by hand. Jason picked up a notebook bound in soft leather and turned to me. This, he said, is going to be the next legacy journal. I raised an eyebrow. Planning for retirement already? Nope, he said. Just thinking ahead. Someday I want my kids, or maybe some kid we mentor, to read how all of this came together. I smiled, touching the embossed cover. Then write honestly. Even the parts where you doubted yourself. Especially those, he said. That's where the gold is. That night, over pasta so good it nearly made me cry, we talked about the early years again. Jason leaned back, swirling wine in his glass. You know what I keep thinking about? That stupid green love seat we had in the garage office. I laughed out loud. With the spring that stabbed you if you sat too far left? Exactly. That couch was the first executive seating. We were mid-laugh when my phone buzzed. A message from Gerald. Need your sign-off. Margot caught wind of a new investor trying to slip in through our back-end holdings. I showed Jason. He took a breath, then nodded. You want me to handle this? I looked at him, confident, calm, prepared. No, I said. I want us to handle it. Together. We stepped out into the chilly night air, the streets humming with mopeds and distant violin music. Somewhere between the Duomo and the wine bar, we found a quiet bench. There, on a smartphone tethered to spotty hotel Wi-Fi, we reviewed the investor's portfolio, flagged the inconsistencies, and submitted the block together. Running a company from a park bench in Florence, Jason said, tapping the screen. New bucket list item, achieved. The next morning, we received confirmation. The block had been accepted, and Carter and Elaine Technologies remained under our careful, collective stewardship. "I'm proud of you," I said, sipping my espresso, "not because you fought back, but because you didn't do it for revenge. You did it for the right reasons." Jason set down his cup. "You taught me that." I just finally remembered. On our last evening in Florence, we walked along the Ponte Vecchio. The sky burned pink and lavender, and the Arno glowed with reflected light. Jason stopped at a small stall and bought a simple gold chain. He handed it to me. "For you." I opened the box. Hanging from the chain was a tiny gold key. "It's symbolic," he said, suddenly a little shy, "because you were always the one with the real keys. To the company, to the story, to everything." I pressed the chain to my heart. "You're going to make someone an excellent husband someday." He snorted. "Well, let's try excellent human first, then we'll see." When we returned to Seattle, we landed to headlines. Carter and Elaine Technologies launches Community Impact Program. Founder's true identity inspires wave of women entrepreneurs. I even got a request to speak at a university. "Elaine," the coordinator wrote, "we believe your story could ignite something powerful in our next generation of founders." I almost declined. Public speaking had never been my forte, unless you counted calling a bingo game at the community center. But Jason looked at me and said, "They're not asking for a TED Talk. They're asking for the truth. The same way you told it to me." So, I said yes. The night of the talk, I wore a simple navy blazer and the key necklace Jason gave me. I stood on stage in front of 200 fresh-faced students and told them the truth. Not the boardroom version, not the PR filtered bio, just the long, winding, deeply human path of a woman who built something meaningful and almost forgot she was allowed to claim it. I ended the talk with this: you don't need to roar to be powerful. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who've been quietly holding everything together while the world calls them invisible. The standing ovation lasted a long time. Afterward, one student came up with tears in her eyes. "My grandma raised me," she said, "and no one ever sees her. But you reminded me she's a queen." I hugged her. When I got home that night, Jason had lit candles and made dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, because apparently we're both nostalgic now. He handed me a small gift bag. Inside was a mug. On it, in bold print, it said, CEO, Founder. Leech. Legend. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. "That was your quote," Jason said, grinning. "Figured it deserved merch." That evening, sitting in the same old living room, wearing pajamas and fuzzy socks, I realized something. Legacy doesn't always look like a plaque or a tower with your name on it. Sometimes legacy is a warm meal, a heartfelt laugh, and a son who finally sees you, not as a burden, not as background noise, but as the heart of the whole damn story. Jason's mug became a bit of a legend around the office. The design team even mocked up a Leech to Legend limited run of t-shirts after our next company-wide retreat. HR was mildly horrified. I was delighted. But in all seriousness, the world had shifted. Not just for me, but for Carter and Elaine Technologies, for Jason, and for every quiet, overlooked soul who'd ever been dismissed while carrying entire empires on their backs. After our return from Italy, we held a reintroduction event at headquarters. Not a press circus, just a town hall-style gathering, open mic, coffee carts, and a modest sign that said, "Meet the woman behind the curtain." I told my story, simply and without embellishment. I explained how Thomas and I started with little more than a box of wires, 2 typewriters, and a $15 folding table. How the boardroom had once been our garage. How the company's first data server was actually just a wheezing Dell tower propped up on milk crates. And then I told them why I stayed silent. Because, I said gently, sometimes you step aside so the people you love can find their footing. There was a hush. Not awkward, reverent. And then the applause. Not thunderous, but real. Warm. Knowing. Jason took the mic next. He didn't read from notes this time. He didn't fidget. He just spoke. "She's the reason I'm standing here," he said. "Not because she gave me the company, but because she gave me the chance to earn it, and then gave me the truth when I was ready to hear it." The applause came again, a little louder. We ended the gathering with small cupcakes, vanilla because chocolate is divisive, and Jason slipped one into his pocket to save for later. Some things never change. A few weeks later, the board held a vote to appoint Jason as co-CEO. He accepted, but only on the condition that I be listed as founder emeritus and executive advisor. "Technically," he said, "you already are. This just makes it official." I agreed, but with one stipulation. "I want Wednesdays off," I said. "To do what?" he asked. "To garden, or nap, or play online bridge with Margaret from New Jersey." He laughed. "Deal." We slipped into a rhythm, the kind that can only happen when trust finally returns. He asked for my input on product pivots. I asked him for tech support when my phone mysteriously updated to Spanish. At night, I sat by the fireplace, knitting again, not to escape, but because my hands needed something to do while my heart caught up with the peace I felt. And the company thrived. CWE's second pilot launched in Arizona, then Colorado, then Maine. Our educational impact model caught the eye of the White House. Jason got an invitation to speak at a national conference on equity in tech. He wore a navy blue suit, just like his father used to, and called me from the podium. "Wish you were here," he said. "I am," I replied, in every word. Eventually, the press got wind of our story. A journalist dubbed me the silent matriarch of Silicon Sound. The article went viral, shared by everyone from tech bros to mommy bloggers. One line stood out to me. Elaine Carter didn't break the glass ceiling. She quietly reinforced the beams underneath it. I kept a printed copy tucked into the back of my photo album, not because I needed recognition, but because someday, Jason's children might want to know where their story began. And speaking of family, Jason met someone. Not flashy, not manipulative. Her name's Lena. She's a science teacher with a dry sense of humor and a garden that rivals mine. The first time I met her, she handed me a jar of homemade pickled beets and said, "I heard you like things sharp." I smiled. I do now. The days moved gently after that. Spring bled into summer. The garden bloomed without asking for permission. The company stabilized. Jason thrived. And me? I finally exhaled. One late evening, after a full day of reviewing contracts, I sat out back with a glass of iced tea and looked over the Carter property. The roses Thomas planted, now taller than me. The white trellis Jason built in high school. The lemon tree I nursed back to life the same year we launched our first product. It was all still here. A legacy not of wealth or titles or stock valuations, but of care, of grit, of love. I heard the screen door creak and turned to see Jason leaning against the frame. "You okay, Mom?" "I am," I said. "I really am." He stepped forward and sat beside me. "You ever think about how we got here?" he asked. "All the time." If Dad were here... He is, I said softly, tapping my heart. In every decision. Every risk we took, every laugh we fought for. Jason looked out at the stars. I still feel like I don't deserve all this sometimes. I took his hand. Deserve's a tricky word, I said, but what you've done with it, that's where the story lives. He nodded. Quiet. Still. After a long silence, I whispered, I think it's time I wrote the whole story down. Not for the press, not for investors. Just for us. He smiled. Title it, The Leech Who Owned the Empire. I laughed. Maybe something a little more subtle. And we sat there, under the stars, mother and son, company founders, and bridge menders. Once dismissed as a burden, now the backbone of something remarkable. Redemption doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it shows up as peace and love and a story finally told. Sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that have been quiet the longest. This journey, mine and Jason's, wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about remembering who we are when the world forgets us, or worse, labels us as less. For years, I stood in the background of my own story, honoring a promise, watching the company Thomas and I built become a stranger's playground. I let others mislabel me. A leech, a burden, the old woman with outdated ideas. But truth has its own rhythm. It doesn't demand attention, it waits, patiently, until one day it's finally invited to the table. I didn't storm into the spotlight. I stepped into it, gently. And what I found there wasn't applause or validation. It was recognition, a chance to reconnect with my son, a chance to safeguard our legacy, a chance to finally breathe again. And that's the quiet power of stepping forward. For anyone out there who's ever felt forgotten, silenced, underestimated, I see you, and I promise, your story matters. You don't need a title or a mansion or a corporate chair to claim your worth. You just need your truth and the courage to speak it when the time comes. So tonight, if you're listening to this with the lights off and your heart a little heavier than usual, know that you're not alone. You're part of something greater. And the leech? Well, she didn't just survive. She rebuilt her roots, reclaimed her name, and watched a new garden grow. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If this story touched you, consider subscribing, only if it truly resonates, and drop your city and local time in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story has traveled. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.